I'm Sterling Watson. I'm a happy alcoholic. Hi, everybody. And I want to thank the specific group for allowing me to come out here and share with you. It's always a pleasure to tell everybody what Alcoholics Anonymous has done in this drunk's life. And that's, Bob D's been telling me what a great group this is. And, you just can't always tell whether Bob's coming right off right or not, But on this deal, he's right. It is a great group, and I appreciate being here. I feel like I'm here tonight because I'm a real alcoholic who found a substitute for alcohol. And the book said that the substitute for alcohol was fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found it here. And to make that substitute work, I had to do some things. I had to get a home group. I had to find a sponsor. I had to get into the book, get the steps, find the principles, put them to work in my life, and do the next right thing. And because I did that, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since September the 25th, 1973. Now, I looked everywhere for a substitute before I found Alcoholics Anonymous. I've tried everything. And so it's with great pleasure tonight that I tell you that since that day in September of 73, it hadn't been necessary for me to be analyzed, tranquilized, hypnotized, or baptized. I'm one of the fortunate ones, and Alcoholics Anonymous did the whole job for me, and for that I'm very, very grateful. We hear a lot about problems other than alcohol. Man, I had problems other than alcohol before I ever knew alcohol was around. You see, I'm not only an alcoholic, I'm a hillbilly. I was born up in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. I was the only son of a hillbilly school teacher. I was born in the middle of the Depression, and the name was Sterling Fletcher Watts III. I don't think I had a chance from the very get-go. And right away, all my life, I felt like I had no identity because Mother taught school. My mama taught school up there in the mountains for 40 years, so the first 18 years of my life, everywhere I went, I was Miss Kitty's little boy. And when I was about 18 or 19, I married a prominent farmer's daughter, and overnight I became Mac Jackson's son-in-law. And I moved away from the mountains to get away from that stuff, and I had one son. He was quite a football player. He was all-state, played at Clemson, later played at the pros. And I got down there and I became Waldo's daddy. So, and I tell you this because you can imagine when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and y'all allow me to stand up here and say I'm Sterling Watts, well, man, I thought I'd arrived, But it's necessary. I don't know how you all got here. I know that every time I meet an alcoholic, we all got here a little bit different. I meet some people that just came in and they were from here in Nevada, over in Arizona, and they just knocked on the door and they said, hey, we've been out there drinking, it's pretty hot out here, and we want to come in and work these steps and get spiritual. Well, I didn't get here that way. I had more help than you can ever believe in. I had help from state troopers and judges, and I had help from bosses and preachers, but the most help I had was from Al-Anon. She found out that she started going to Al-Anon for this peculiar behavior of mine. In fact, I say that I came into Alcoholics Anonymous when I became powerless over Al-Anon. And she'd been coming to this outfit 6 or 7 months before she ever got me in here, however long it was or whatever. And do you remember the first night they ever asked you to read? They'd ask me, I don't know, after a certain length of time, they asked me to read how it works. Man, I felt good. I went back in the restroom. I practiced. I wasn't going to miss a word. And I came out and I'm sitting there on the front seat just grinning and feeling important. And the chairman forgot my name and said to read how it works is Nancy's husband. So, but that's good for a drunk like me with the ego I got, because every once in a while I'll be sitting around in a meeting and some old-timer, like the one I met over here on the end, will say, I think I am somebody, and they'll call on old what's-his-face, and I kind of need that with my ego. Let me know who I am and where I am. Now, when I look back on this thing, I thought I was a weird kid that grew up in a normal family. My sponsor and I accepted that. You know, they're studying us. We're probably the most studied species other than white rats that there are, you know. And hey, man, they came up with this thing about a dysfunctional family. Well, now, man, that sounded better than me being a weird kid. So I went to my sponsor. I said, is it possible that I grew up in one of these dysfunctional families? He said, I'm sure you did. You were there, weren't you? Well, and you know, come to think about it, all the schools I was in seemed to be dysfunctional. The Army unit was dysfunctional. So, but I had another, I'm not sure when I started lying. I can never remember when I didn't lie. Now, and I was a different kind of liar. I really loved to lie. And you know, I didn't just lie and leave. I hung around to make sure you believed that lie I told you. And I'd hang around in there and keep lying till you did believe it, you know. And just to show you, I'd lie about anything. When I was just a little boy, about 8 or 9 years old, we had to memorize Bible verses and repeat them before we could eat every day, every meal on Sunday. Now, I was capable of memorizing Bible verses, but I took a lot of pleasure in making them up. And one of the verses that I made up was, if a man goeth on a long journey and returneth not, he stayeth a long while. Now, you know, it's bad enough to be making up Bible verses. It's messing with the Scriptures is dangerous, but what I liked was to see the old folks running through that Bible way late at night. Now that just made me feel warm all over, I can tell you that. Now in this home, there were 4 of us, a mother, a father, and a sister, 5 years older than I and me. And my sister was the second most perfect person that ever walked the face of this earth. She never told a lie, she never came home late. She made straight A's all the way through. She was valedictorian in high school. She was dean's list in college. She just cornered the whole market in being good. Now, I liked attention. And if I was going to get any attention, it just looked like to me I was going to have to be good at being bad. And so drinking was not a problem as a child, as a teenager, because I was so well supervised. Everybody knew who I was. And so I had a lot of adult supervising as a child and as a teenager. But shortly after graduating from high school, I enlisted into service. And I had to go 55 miles away from the mountains to be inducted. And that was in September of 1946. And I got drunk. That's the first time I'd ever been away from home that far without adult supervision. I got drunk and I got sick and I just about died. And 27 years later, 3 states away, in September of 73, I'm still drinking too much. I'm still getting sick and I'm still almost dying. So there's absolutely certain that there's a certain amount of insanity that goes along in my life to be able to do nothing but protect my right to drink. I changed everything in my life. I changed where I lived. I changed the jobs I had. I did everything, made all these changes, and not knowing when I was making them that I was doing it just to protect my right to drink. And I only found this out when I looked back on this thing. And it was quite a... Now, Army, the service was quite a disaster. When I went in service, if you could walk straight and chew chewing gum and get somewhere on time, you made sergeant. And I went in as a buck private and came out as a buck private. So that's all you need to know. In fact, they told me at Camp Stoneman, they said, if you'll just go ahead and take a discharge a couple of months early, we'll let you go home. And we'll give you an honorable discharge, but if you stay here, there's a good chance you'll end up in Leavenworth. So we don't need any more war stories about that. So then I got back from service in 1948, and industry had moved into the mountains, and I got a job right away in a textile mill. I married my childhood sweetheart. Things went along beautifully. I worked hard, got a lot of promotions. A year later, my son came along in 1954, a group of us husbands bought a piece of land and built a little homes out in the woods like everybody was doing after World War II, and life seemed like it was going along just fine. I thought I was very popular. I belonged to the Elks, the JCs, the Moose, the VFW, the Eagles. I belonged to anything that would have me, and And I used to look back and think I was popular. Now, I lived in a dry county, and all these places serve booze, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. I got a period of, when I look back in my life, I have a period, if I had any normal drinking, I'm not sure what normal drinking is, don't think it's important, but if I had any, it was from 48 to 62. And that's when I thought things were going great guns and I'm in no problem whatsoever. I would have told you that I had no problems with drinking at all, but when I look back in my inventory, for instance, and we'll just cover this right quick, I'd had been in 5 or 6 automobiles totally lost. Sometimes I was driving, sometimes I was riding. Most of the time we had no idea who's riding, who's driving. Didn't really matter. One day during this time I had 3 accidents in one day on Thanksgiving Day, and that day I hit the same man twice. Now, I didn't hit him over in the parking lot while we were untangling or anything. I got him 15 miles away in the afternoon after I'd hit him that morning. And you know, in those days, you just called the insurance agent and reported these accidents. And I reported that second accident, and he said, "What? How drunk are you?" Said, "You reported that accident this morning." I said, "Man, I'm not drunk. I've hit him again." You know. Well, now, you know, when I was a kid, I told you about this perfect sister. Well, the only thing that I ever remember hearing was, "Why can't you be like Elizabeth? Why can't you be like Elizabeth?" Well, I didn't know why I couldn't be like Elizabeth. Didn't really want to be like her, you know. So when I got married, I'm not a talented man. I'm not handy with tools or anything else. I have very few talents. I don't know a screwdriver from a pair of pliers. I'm not a yard man. I couldn't care less about a green yard or flowers or anything else. And you know, it seemed like to me that everywhere I went, if I moved into your neighborhood, I'd move right into the middle of a bunch of handymen that could fix anything. And right away it'd start, "Why can't you be like Tom? Why can't you be like Bill?" Well, you know, I was used to that. I'd been to boot camp on why you couldn't be like Elizabeth, see? So that didn't bother me. And it looked like to me if I moved in, they'd be right across the street from me the next day, yard of the month. And all I ever got was like wild onion of the decade, you know. So this marriage is not going pretty good. And so I told you we built these houses. And, you know, they're supposed to be turnkey. Well, these handymen, they went to work. Some of them put in the furnace, some of them put on the roof, some of them did the cabinets. All of them doing something. I'm not doing anything. I think that's the first time I really felt impending doom, because she's looking at me, "When are you going to do something?" She hadn't said anything yet, and one day she was up at her dad's in July, and I noticed, you know, I used to get these real intuitive thoughts when I was drinking, and I noticed that nobody had put a mailbox in yet, and I thought, "Boy, I'll get this thing." And so now, by this time, an interesting thing had happened in my life as I look back, and it happened to some other alcoholics. Any job I didn't want to do, anything I disliked, I had mentally signed a certain amount of booze to it. If I was going to trade cars, took a fifth. If I was going to borrow money, took a fifth. Now, painting's interesting. Now, I'm a kind of painter that goes and gets the liquor at least once and maybe twice before he ever gets the paint and the drop cloth, you know. And I had this sister, for instance. We didn't get along. I called her my 2-pint sister, you know. So, but I never had put in a mailbox, so I don't know how much liquor I assigned to it, but I think a good amount, because what occurred here is I got a 8-foot 2-inch pipe, and I put a 8-foot 1.5-inch pipe down in it and took it down to the superintendent and had him, the master mechanic, and had him spot weld it all the way up. And I came back home and I put it down in 4 feet of steel reinforced concrete and went down to Sears and got the biggest mailbox they had and put Sterling Fletcher Watts III across. Might have been in old English letters, I don't know, but let it flow. I brought that back and I put it down in that reinforced concrete and I tamped it well. And I went to sleep that night, and you drunks know how you just worked hard, you drank all day, and you're slipping over into that slumber that only a good drunk's know. And I thought, boy, she's going to be proud of me when she comes home tomorrow. And the next morning, about 5 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my neighbor. He said, "Watts, what the hell is wrong with you yesterday?" I said, "Why?" He said, you got that mailbox in facing your house. Now, I had about an hour to dig it up and turn it around before she got home. It looked like I'd built a small swimming pool and filled it in, you know. Things aren't going good in my marriage at this time. See, I was a tavern drinker. Man, I don't know, y'all probably don't have taverns out here, but I was a tavern drinker, and I loved the dark lights and the beautiful ladies that were in there to comfort you, and they were there to dance with you, and the country music, and then a good old shuffleboard, you know, and I loved that kind of thing. I'd stop in there in the evenings. I'd get off from work, and I worked hard. You work hard, you play hard. But I stopped in there just for a couple of beers just to get things together and then go home. Now, I knew that I had a wife at home that I loved, and I had a young son, and I ought to be at home, and I meant to go just after a couple of beers. And they'd throw me out every night when the closing came, and I didn't mean to do that. Well, my wife hated everything about drinking. I've had her say, you almost stopped and got a beer. She got where she could tell when I was thinking about it, you know, and we developed this thing that we call it some kind of a muscular chemical reaction. I'd been a muscle to take chemicals and her mouth would fly open. And I call that chin music. And that is the chinniest woman you ever saw in your life. I couldn't take a drink. I never drank in any peace whatsoever. And by this time, the marriage is kind of falling apart. And I worked my way up in my textile mill till I'm buying a lot of chemicals and a lot of machinery, and these salesmen are calling on me, and they drank just like I did. But they left home on Monday. They didn't go home till Friday. Had 5 days to drink without any chin music. So I gave up probably the best job I ever had, and I came down to South Carolina from Virginia to sell chemicals. I know today I came down there to drink in peace without listening to all that chin music. Now I got down to South Carolina, and there was one company hired me, and it was a one-owner company, and he lived in Rhode Island. And he said an interesting thing. He came down there, and he said, I'm buying you a new automobile, and I'm giving you an unlimited expense account. And he said, I want you to use these tools. He said, my name's not well known in the South. And he said, I want you to use this unlimited expense account and this new car to get my name all over the South. Well, now I know that he meant in places where he had chemicals to sell, but I got it everywhere. There's not many jails and state troopers that didn't know that company's name before it was over with. I think I gave him a good day's work for what he wanted, you know. Well, I was pretty good at what I did. I knew how to demonstrate my products, and I worked hard. And as long, you know, we didn't have in South Carolina and Georgia at this time. You didn't have many bottles, over-the-bar drinking, nothing. It was all brown bagging, and I just loaded up 3 or 4 cases and drove around. And I'd pull in a parking lot and raise the trunk, and we'd have a few drinks, or go down to the swimming hole, a fishing hole, a golf course, and we'd drink a little bit. I had one guy down there say, you called on us 19 months and we wasn't sure what you're selling. Said, we thought you was a liquor salesman in the wrong place, you know. But, you know, by this time I'll tell you, you know, and I've met a lot of you people that had the same thing I had. If I could keep my alcohol at the right level, I could go 2 or 3 days and not sleep. And so they really liked for me to entertain them. You know, I could go out and I could deal cards all night, and I could take a shower and play golf all day and do it right over again. They'd say things like, why, we'd rather ride with old Watts and him drunk. We had Tom and him sober. And I'd just swell up and drink a pint and take them anywhere they wanted. I love it when they bragged on me, you know. Now, it's necessary for me to tell you that when I got here, I weighed almost 300 pounds. I don't know when I blossomed up that heavy. I was full of fluid. You all know what happens to us, and I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I do know that my company had insisted that I get an insurance exam, and I hadn't been going to get that insurance exam. I wouldn't go, and in fact, they had to almost fire me before I went. So I finally went in, and the nurse took my blood pressure, and she left, and I started rolling my sleeve down, and she came through the door with this card. I said, what's that? She said, that's oxygen. I said, for what? She said, your blood pressure's so high, you're in stroke zone. I said, now, wait a minute. I just came in here feeling good to take an insurance exam. And if my blood pressure's that high, I ought to have some kind of symptoms. Well, she said, usually you're dizzy. Well, I'd been dizzy a good bit for a year or so, you know. And I had worried about I might have a brain tumor because I had a place that we called Drunk Alley. And I'd come in late at night down this drunk alley all the way across South Carolina, and there were several bridges there. And every once in a while I'd get to a bridge and there'd be three of them. And I could not negotiate three bridges. I could pull over and sleep just a few minutes and get them down to two, and then I could get across two bridges, you know. And I wasn't sure that there wasn't something wrong with my head, but then I remember, so how sick I was, I came home and I said, hey man, everything's fine. My drinking, nothing's happening. I just got a little blood pressure problem. And but about this time, she decided that, well, she started talking to everybody. You know, there's always some woman in the neighborhood that knows all about alcoholism or anything else, and they were giving her all kind of advice. And so she started taking me to some AA meetings. I reckon we went. I can't find many people who saw us there. We might have gone to the Automobile Association. She's sicker than I was. But anyway, one time while we was there, we run into this old fella named Squire Jones. He's dead now. And Squire's a little bitty fella, had about 35 or 40 years sobriety, and sugar wouldn't melt in his mouth, you know, and she just fell in love with him. So one day, I figured this thing out. One day that chin music got unbearable, and I said, well, now I'll just call Squire and talk AA. And oh, that tickled her to death. She handed me the number, and I called Squire and told him I was ready, and he got in his car and started across town. I got in my car and left town. Now, made sense to me. Well, now, Squire came over there, and he kindly 12-stepped Nancy, and evidently she told him a lot about me, because I was shaking bad, and she must have told him. And I was shaking so bad I could thread a sewing machine, it running wide open, you know, and so all she got out of that 12-step call was if I drink a lot of Cairo syrup and orange juice, or a honey and orange juice, I'd be all right. So I'd come in about half drunk, and she'd stand there and shove 3 or 4 tablespoons full of this Cairo down my throat and hand me this concoction to drink, a half Cairo and orange juice, and I'd get it down. And I'd head down to the end of the hall where, in the clothes hamper where I had my vodka hid, and I'd be so stuck together I couldn't hardly get a drink in, you know. Now, so it didn't take us long to figure out AA wasn't doing any good for me. All it was doing is making me the sweetest drunk east of the Mississippi, you know. I think the fruit flies might have been following me, I don't know, but that didn't slow her down. She found a fella who had a job just like mine, and he'd gone to AA, and it didn't work for him. But he'd gone to a psychiatrist, and he got all well, and he came over and told us all about this. So off I went to a psychiatrist. Now, I can tell you this, that's another 2 or 3 hour story. I have yet to meet. I know that if an alcoholic wants to be with a psychiatrist and needs to be with a psychiatrist, it works fine. But I have never seen a psychiatrist that can even hold a candle to an alcoholic that don't want to be there. I'm telling you, I believe if I'd have stayed with this psychiatrist long enough, I'd have had him in an institution, because he was no match for me, I can tell you that. Well, anyway, he said an interesting thing. You know, it tickled me, but anyway, he said this thing about the next time he acts up. Well, now, see, he wouldn't say drunk, he said acts up. Now, in those days, in the late 60s and early 70s, we had no detox in Greenville, South Carolina. The only place you could go was to a hospital for the emotionally disturbed or to jail. They didn't have anything in between. So I went over to this emotionally disturbed hospital, and to show you what was going on, and I never heard a thing about alcoholism. I never heard anything. In fact, I've been over there 5 or 6 times. I've been over there in the back of a pickup truck. I've been over in the trunk of a car. I've been over there in an ambulance. I've gone any way you can go, and I've been dead drunk every time I got there. Look at my medical history, and it says hypertension, paranoia, schizophrenia. Never says anything about alcohol, and I guess at those prices they didn't want to write drunk down there. That's the only thing I know. But anyhow, it's interesting. I'm a kind of drunk, if you give me a little liquid Valium and let me sleep 3 or 4 days, I'll wake up and everything will be all right. And as I remember this, I came to an occupational therapy. Now, man, I told you I'm not talented, but I was making ceramic ashtrays and leather watch bands. And they were things of beauty, too, I tell you. Those leather watch bands, I could make 3 leather watch bands in 1 hour, and the next best person in that class, it took them 3 hours to make one. I was turning those things out. If they hadn't run out of leather, I'd still be over there, I can tell you that. Now, you know, and I was just wasting time the way I see it. They had a deal where they called us clients, and if you in this hospital, if you'd been good all week, you got a reward on Saturday. Now somebody asked me, said, "Well, what could you do? What trouble could you get into in that hospital?" Well, I can tell you one thing that bothered them. They had a 60-foot fountain out there, and I put a box of Tide in it. They had a snowball as big as this building out there, you know. Well, anyway, this particular week, if you'd been good, you got to go on a field trip. And the field trip consisted of gathering up in the lobby, getting a peanut butter sandwich, and hiking over to Kmart. Now, in this group that I had, there were 20 of us, 19 women and me. And this is back when they gave a lot of shock treatments, and most of these women were taking shock treatments. And they, to say the best, were nervous. And so he gathered us up out there, and he explained to me the problem he had, that all these women, most of them smoked, but he couldn't trust them with matches. And he gave me the matches. So off I went with my little group following me, and I thought to myself, you know, at last they found out my leadership ability. And I kind of felt like I was in officer's candidate school, you know. And to show you how sick I was, it was a couple of years after that I realized what had actually happened, that I was 44 years old and had worked my way up of keeping to the matches in a nut house. You know, I came back, I got home from that stint in the hospital, and she said, "Well, you know, you haven't tried to be rehabilitated." Well, we didn't want to miss nothing, so off I went to. We got a state supported rehabilitation center, and they put me in there, and I got the biggest resentment I ever had in my life. Now I didn't know what a resentment was, but I was awful mad. And the reason is everybody down there was a ward of the state. It wasn't costing them a nickel. We had a doctor down there, and he just locked his practice up. It wasn't working, and he was in for free. Well, I had a job, had no insurance, and it's going to cost me $600 for this deal. And I was really upset over that. Now, I'll get back to that in a minute, but I thank God used that $600 to get my attention. Anyway, they said, we don't support AA at all one way or the other, but we allow them to come in here on Thursday, and you can go over there if you want to. Well, I went over to an AA meeting, and I thought, y'all the sickest bunch of people I ever saw in my life. I mean, and the reason, see, I'm in there, and it's costing me $600. I'm so sick of trying to rehabilitate me, and you're coming in there telling me your problems. Now, what made me think you were telling me your problems? I had a young man, didn't look like he's a day over 25 or 30 years old. He said he couldn't take one drink without getting drunk. Well, now, I never felt so sorry for anybody in my life. I mean, can you imagine a young man one drink drunk? I mean, I couldn't see this, you know. And I wrote his name down, because I knew that when I got out of there, if I could find him, if I could keep him buying, I'd keep him going 3 or 4 weeks anyway. I could tell him that. They said an interesting thing when I got through down there. They said, go back to Greenville and don't drink, and we think you'll be all right. Well, I kind of suspected that myself, but I never had done anything that anybody ever told me to do, and I decided this time that I'd do exactly what they told me to do, when they told me to do it, and I'd prove to them it wouldn't work for me, and I'd sue them and get that $600 back. So I went back to Greenville, and I didn't drink for about 6 months or some period of time. And I'm living proof of what, we got a lot of new people here tonight. Don't try what I did. I tried taking liquor away and putting nothing else in. No God, no program, nothing. Just took liquor away. And it's miserable. You see, my nerves are still there. I'm not living in the now. I hated everybody and everything. I got a great big glass of iced tea, and everywhere I went I said, look at me, poor little old me, 45 years old and never drink again. I said things like, we'll get our milk and cookies and go to bed, because I thought my manhood was gone. If I couldn't drink, I just thought the world had come to an end. And so I hated, this started a period of time where I hated everybody and everything. I hated your guts if you could drink and not have any trouble. And if you could not drink and be happy, I was madder at you yet, you know. And I was just full of fury at the whole world. And had I not drunk, I'd have had to commit suicide. There was no living the way I did. And I did get drunk, and that started a period of time when I say I drank zombolically. I drank just like a zombie. I didn't know what, it took me just that quick. And for instance, I usually call my customers and I say, can I come over tomorrow for lunch? And I'd call and they'd say, well, fool, you was over here yesterday. Or Tom would call and say, where's my sample? I don't know who Tom was, and I didn't know what sample he had. And I'd kind of do this. I'd come to on the steering wheel, and I'd look down. If I'm nice and clean like I am tonight, I knew I was coming home. Didn't know where I'd been, but going out. Didn't know where I was going. And I'd go around the corner and get in the hotel, in the motel, and just to have a couple of drinks, just to get a couple of drinks to find out, get my itinerary together, and you know, the rat race had come right on. If I'd been sick all over myself, I knew I was coming home. And that's the way my life was. I came home from Atlanta, Georgia, and sometime in September, I'm not sure when. I went back in what she referred to as my rat hole. I don't know exactly how long I was back there, but I never want to forget the night that I came to or woke up or whatever I did, because I'd been laying back there several days in a drunken liar, and if you were drunk, you know what I'm talking about, and you know what the stench was and how you felt. I couldn't walk, and had to crawl to the bathroom, and when the worst thing happened, the liquor kind of quit working for me. When I could get a drink down, nothing happened, and a drunk like me just panics when that happens. And I'd just keep putting one down, it'd come back, and I kind of dropped my head over my hands and said, my God, nobody knows. And she was there and said, AA knows, and got me dressed, and we went to an AA meeting that night, and I think that's the first time I ever got real honest about Alcoholics Anonymous, or thinking about I might want to quit drinking, because in our area we have desire chips, and we'd gone to some meetings I told you back a long time ago, and they'd give out the chips. Now, whoever took me, they had some cakes and donuts and coffee like you all had here, and so when they gave out the chips, they'd hit me, and I'd jump up and get one. I'd have got all 6 of them right through the birthday medallion. I didn't care if they'd have kept hitting, you know. Now, but this night, she said, you didn't take a chip. I said, no, because if I don't get a drink down tonight, I'll die. I've never been so bad in all my life. And I finally got a drink down that night. And this is important to me. I wait 2 days. That was on September the 23rd. And there's all kind of evidence that was my last drink. But I wait 2 days to celebrate my dry date. Now, I was too sick to know to do that, and I think that's a God thing in my life, because I believe had I celebrated the 23rd, and I'd have been involved with you in AA, and somewhere along the line that my great mind would have said, you know, you might have a false date there, and you fooled them, and I'd have lost respect for you, and I wouldn't have been able to stay sober. But since that day, the September the 25th in 1973, life has taken on a direction that I had no idea it was possible for me to go. You know, we've heard a lot of times, I don't know where you have that saying out here, but a leper can't change its spots. I believe if a leper is going to change its spots, it will do it right here in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's about the only place I know you can do it. If you had told me that I could stand before a group of this size tonight, or any group, and be as free and happy and joyous as I am now, I would not have believed it. In fact, when I came in, I remember asking them, I said, do you think that you can keep me alive until I get to be 55? And when I got to be 55, I was in better shape, better health, and happier than I was when I was 35. But this program, I don't know why I've got this gift of sobriety. I have no idea. I do believe it's a gift from God as I understand Him, but it's like any other gift. I believe that there's a certain amount of responsibility that goes along for me to keep this gift and enjoy it. I believe it's my responsibility to attend meetings on a regular basis and be sitting out there when the newcomers come in like they are here tonight, and reach out and give them my hand and take them through, if they're willing to take them through the steps as my sponsor took me. I think that I have a right to present that 164 pages to them exactly how it's printed and written in this big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have the right to delete from it or add on to it. But I think that it's my responsibility to be here. And you know, I kind of look like this. For many years now, I've asked God every morning to come into my life, but I'm an alcoholic and I can't stay sober without Him. And you know, when you was a kid, do you remember how you wanted to try to impress somebody? How you wanted to impress your daddy or your mother or somebody? Well, I find my day goes much better if I live every day trying to impress God as I understand Him. It seems to my day seems to go a whole lot better. Now, I'm living proof that you don't have to do everything right to get this program. There are certain things you have to do, but I didn't do everything right. The things I did right was I continued to go to meetings and I got a home group. Those two things I think are absolutely necessary. No matter what anybody says, they're necessary. And I tell you that just from my own opinion. I mean, my own experience. It was necessary for me. Now, they said get a sponsor. The way I got a sponsor is indicative of how I was thinking. There's an old man said he'd been sober 29 years. I talked to that old man. He was a rough, tough, mean CB and drank like I did. And I knew nobody drank like I did, been sober 29 years. So I knew if he could make you believe that lie, I wanted what he had. And so I got him to be my sponsor, and he couldn't see to drive at night. And I'd drive him all around. He spoke everywhere, and I'd be sitting there, and any newcomer that was around, when the meeting was over, I'd go up and put my arm around him. I'd say, hey, man, you keep on coming back. This thing's really important. Between me and that speaker up there, we got near 30 years in this thing, you know. Now, the reason I think that home groups and meetings are so important, first of all, I think meetings are important because it shows that you're dealing and being around sober people, no matter what your mind are. If you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, strange things are going to happen to you, no matter what your attitude is. If you sit there and continue to go to meetings over and over and over again, strange things will happen to you. You know, I was a slip planner, and I used to sit maybe on the front seat, and I'd be listening to a speaker, not hearing a word he said, and have a glass of beer up here watching and I just couldn't wait till that meeting was over. And I went to a meeting I'd never been to before, and I'm sitting in that meeting doing that night with that mug of beer over my head, and I'd planned to go to Sears and have my car serviced the very next day, and right around the corner they had the coldest beer in Greenville. And I had already planned to put my car, while they're servicing my car, I'm going to go and have this cold beer. And that night, a meeting I hadn't intended to go to, don't know why I went. I met a guy, when the meeting was over, I met a guy named Charlie Brown from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, I've been telling this story for a long time, and I've never met this Charlie Brown before or since. I break his anonymity because I'd love sometime to run into a meeting and see him. Well, after that meeting, we chatted a little bit, and he was a salesman just visiting in Greenville. And we left, and I went home, and next morning I went down to Sears and put my car in. They ran it up on the rack, and I turned to leave, and there stood Charlie Brown. And he started talking to me. And you know how y'all are. You can't get away from us. And so by the time I got through talking with him, they came and patted me on the shoulder and said, your car's ready. He said, would you mind taking me out to the Alano Club so I can have some coffee? And I never got that cold beer. And so I'm sitting around these AA meetings, and I noticed that people, you know, the more trouble they had, they seemed to really explain themselves, and they'd say how things were strange things that happened in their life, and people would say, well, isn't it great how God's working in your life? Well, strange things were happening to me, but that was just one of them, this Charlie Brown incident, and I mentioned it. And they said, hey, man, isn't that great how God's working in your life? And other things happened, but the point I'm trying to make is I didn't know God was working in my life till you told me. Actually, and that's why it's important to be around you today. Sometimes I don't think God's working in my life, and all I've got to do is go to an AA meeting, and I see living proof that God's working, and so I know I get faith from that, and that's what happened. Now, the reason I think it's that the home group is so important is people see you on a regular basis, and we're intuitive, and we pick out things, and you know, all my life I've gone and I looked at your rules. When I joined anything, I looked at your rules, and I know if you break rules, you get in trouble. But if you can circumvent them, if you can find a loophole, you can get by rules. Well, I think that they knew this is what I was looking for, and I'd been we had this old lady in our group had been sober longer than dirt. She knew answers to questions I wasn't ever going to ask her, but she'd give me her phone number and say, now, young man, if you want to take a drink, you call me. I'd say, look, you gave me that Tuesday night. Take my number. You may have lost it, So I took her number, and so one week I'd had an awful week, and nothing worked. No customers did what I wanted them to do. I called home. The chin music was going wide open, and so I stopped out on the interstate. I went and I called Taylor, and I said, Taylor, identified myself and told her what my problem was. I said, I'm out here and I got a bad attitude. Things are gone wrong. I got 7 liquor stores to pass before I can get home. Now, you woman, you said to me to call you. I'm calling you. What you want me to do? She thought a minute. She said, go out in the median and strip off naked and stand there till they take you to jail. Now, today we know what she had observed me, and she knew exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for some circumstance you didn't have covered, and I could say, see, I'm different. So that's why I think home group is so important, because she'd seen what a phony I was. Now, I got a sponsor, and he got me by the hand. He took me through the steps, and I learned a lot in the steps. Mainly, I learned a lot about trust and a lot about love and responsibility, but the main thing I learned in the steps was about me. I didn't know about me. I didn't know what my limitations were, my capabilities. I thought I had to be the very best at everything before I even tried it. I found out, and this was a great relief to me. I'm not a talented man, as I told you, and all my job is to just do the very best today with what God gave me to do with, and that's a comfort to a guy like me. And I've been sober about 8 years, and I'd been DCM, I'd been GSR, I'd been a state treasurer, I'd held all the offices, worked at the intergroup, the whole business. If you'd looked at me, you thought I was a AA poster child, and so. But something that I realized that some of you had that I didn't have, and I went to my sponsor and I said, what do you think's wrong, Jim? And he said, well, why don't you get back in the book and see maybe if you can find out something that you've missed in that book. In big book study 2 or 3 times, but I'd never gotten down into that book just looking for something to use it as a textbook to find something that might fix something that was wrong with me. And I found so many things in there that I'd passed over. I can just run through a couple of them with you. One at the end that meant a lot to me. At the end of chapter 4, it says God would disclose himself to us if we drew near to him. And that made sense. And I took a look at where I thought I ought to be for God, to be near God. To me, it's right here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think this is the closest I can get to God as I understand him. This is for me. Every message that I've ever had from a higher power, or God as I understand him, has come from another alcoholic as I see it. And so when I come to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I'm just checking in to get my messages. And you all the messengers. And I can tell when I get out and I don't call the message center, if I don't get in touch with the message center, it just takes 2 or 3 days and I'm all fouled up. I've had more trauma since I got sober than I ever had when I was drinking. I'm a kind of drunk that I didn't know how to handle death. There's a lot of things I didn't know how to handle, but death was very traumatic. And when my mother died, I got drunk. My daddy died, I got drunk. I just made an ass out of myself. And I'd been sober about almost 10 years. And my wife of 35 years, my Al-Anon of 10, fell dead very suddenly. 3 months later, my sponsor died. 6 months later, my sister died. And I would have never been able to get through any of these things if it hadn't have been from what the old-timers, my sponsor used to say, call us early birds. So the early birds had showed me what to do, and I just watched them. They didn't tell me, but when trauma came in their life, they tripled up on their involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I did. And I found the power here in Alcoholics Anonymous to get through all of those situations without even thinking about taking a drink. It just surrounded me with power. And ever since then, every problem that I have, I can come to Alcoholics Anonymous And I can find the power in here if I ask for it and become willing to get me from here to here, when if I started drinking over here, I'd either have a wet brain or be dead. So there's not enough liquor distilled in the country to get me through some of my problems, but the power's here that's gotten me through every one of them. And I had been, I was very lonesome after my first wife died, and because I tripled up in Alcoholics Anonymous, I met a young lady named Donna, and she'd been sober a little over a year, and we were married and had a tremendous AA. She was a great part of my life. We had an AA marriage. We got to every morning of our life we got together and we read and prayed together and invited God into this marriage. And I can tell you that works. A little later on in the day when you get maybe a little mad and your neck stands out, if you've invited God into that marriage, you are a little bit careful about how you respond to those little. In fact, my wife, I don't know whether she started this or not, but she used to, when she'd see me getting, and I had more temper than she did, and she'd see me getting a little mad, she'd say, "I'm Donna, I'm an alcoholic." And that just reminded me that we cannot have anger. It tells us in the book we need to leave that to somebody else. And it also reminded me of how we act at AA meetings, and so it was great. And this May a year ago, I lost Donna. Very suddenly I was at an AA golf outing, and she had some type of a hemorrhage and never regained consciousness. So but the wonderful thing about it is, on my way back from that AA conference, I was able to say, "God, what am I supposed to learn from this experience?" And because I have never been so grateful as being an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous and being married to an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because we had done this marriage the AA way, I had absolutely no regrets, no guilt. I had some grief, but no guilt, and I just think it's great. My first marriage, I had done some things it was impossible to make amends for, and I'd made amends for everything that I could. But so when she passed away, I had grief with guilt, and I know them both. And this AA way is a whole lot better. Today I'm retired. I've been retired about 6 or 7 years, and I was a workaholic. I had no idea what I was going to do when I retired. I was frightened of it. You know the rest. I got retired, and God provided what I needed. I've got more people to sponsor. I'm working down at the intergroup office. My life is so busy. Somebody said with his birthday that he didn't know what to do with his time now. And so God has, through Alcoholics Anonymous, because I made myself available once again, I got the power to have a great and happy life today. Now I told you about that son. He's got the old company that I had, and he's running it, and things are pretty good, and he's got 2 children. They're both grown now. Both of them are grown, and they've never seen their grandfather take a drink. If I never get another reward from Alcoholics Anonymous, that's enough. That's enough there. In fact, I had this little girl say, I spoke over to her school one day, and she said, "Papa, you mean you were in jail?" She couldn't believe it, Well, I tell you this because that little girl asked me to come over and speak to her school. She's a school teacher now. She was in school then. And she asked me to come over and speak to her class on alcoholism, and I really felt good about that. I hadn't been much of a part of her life, nor my alcoholism, and I went over to school that day, and I'm standing out there in the lobby, and I'm waiting for my granddaughter, and this little old principal walks up to me, little old gray-headed lady, and looked me right square in the eye. She said, "Are you Allison's granddaddy?" Now, I don't know whether I'm ever going to find out who I am, but thank God I know what I am. I'm an alcoholic that's found a substitute for alcohol in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank y'all.